Bom dia. Bom dia a todos. Bom dia. Mais um encontro do Tiaços, neste belo sábado azulado em São Paulo, uma manhã bonita de sol e de frio. Estamos reunidos hoje no sábado de manhã para falarmos de pornografia. Que interessante! Falar de pornografia pela manhã sobre a ótica junguiana. E é com muita alegria que eu quero apresentar Giorgio Tricarico. Eu sempre esqueço. Giorgio, me corrija, por favor. Tricarico. Eu vou fazer a apresentação formal dele. Giorgio nasceu em Milão, na Itália. Ele é psicólogo, psicoterapeuta, analista junguiano e supervisor membro da IAP e um dos fundadores do grupo finlandês-estoniano de psicologia analítica. E foi também seu primeiro presidente. Ele trabalha com pacientes adultos desde 98 e tem dado várias palestras e seminários internacionalmente sobre questões relevantes em psicologia analítica. Ele é o autor de O Labirinto da Possibilidade, um fator terapêutico na prática analítica, e The Lost Godness, um caleidoscópio sobre o pornô. Desde 2009, ele trabalha e vive em Helsinki, na Finlândia. É um imenso prazer te receber, Giorgio. Queria contar uma pequena historinha de como é que foi o seu convite, o convite para você chegar no Tiaços. Eu tinha acabado de ler o seu livro, que eu achei um livro muito instigante, muito singular. Não é um tema muito abordado pela comunidade junguiana, e mesmo quando a comunidade junguiana o faz, me parece que o faz de uma maneira um tanto quanto tradicional e conservadora. Por isso que eu acho que o teu livro ele trouxe um ângulo inteiramente diferente e muito instigante para pensar a questão da pornografia como um fenômeno, como um símbolo. E na mesma semana que eu havia terminado de ler, um amigo em comum, Mark Wimber, que esteve aqui também no Tiaços conosco, ele havia me sugerido te convidar para falar no Tiaços. E eu comentei com o Mark, acabei de ler o livro dele, estava pensando nisso. O Mark me deu seu e-mail, eu entrei em contato e você gentilmente aceitou o nosso convite. Obrigado pela tua presença, é uma grande alegria ter você falando conosco. Você está na Finlândia, a gente está no Brasil, uma distância considerável, mas, por favor, fique à vontade, tá bem? A palavra é sua. Obrigado.
Thank you very much, Marcos, and for this very kind presentation. I'm very honored to be a guest of Tiaços and to be at least virtually in Brazil, a country that I would really like to see one day in my life. So thank you very much for this invitation, and I hope that I will meet your expectations as a group and as a number of participants. Speaking about a topic which, like Marcus said, it's very seldom addressed in the field of analytical psychology. I may be wrong, but I found only one paper by James Hillman, by the way, I think written in 1992, so when the internet was just starting, about porn. And then I found no other book in the Jungian environment, let's say, about this. Of course, there are many other books instead about porn, because as you all know, probably, porn is one of the most, let's say, it's one of the biggest business in the current world, because there are thousands and thousands of web pages in the net. Somewhere I read that even 60% of the World Wide Web is about porn, but I'm not sure about it, so don't take it as a data. But anyway, there has been it has been an expanding and growing industry in the World Wide Web. And it has become, of course, more and more important also in terms of publications, because when a phenomenon is so big and it brings so much money, there has been a rising number of books written about it. But many books, actually books usually divide themselves in two. There are many, many books speaking about porn in a pathologizing way, underlining the danger of addiction, how porn can ruin the relationship between sexes, underlining how women are portrayed in porn in a very devaluated way. And by the way, the internet porn in the last decades has seen a growth in terms of brutality and violence in the scenes performed. So many books are concentrating on these aspects, and very few books are usually trying to put porn in the context of content that are subverting the norms and the values of the current world. So they underline more like the subversive nature of porn, even in a positive way. But nevertheless, the books divide themselves into pro-porn or anti-porn very easily, with the biggest amount of books which are anti-porn. I tried to write something which was somehow neutral, so to say, trying to deepen this phenomenon as a very important current phenomenon of the modern world, actually the postmodern world. So I tried to avoid, let's say, this kind of polarities between pro or against. And okay, now I see maybe some more people I prefer to see. I'm very uncomfortable in being in virtual environment. So since a polarized position between pro and cons is not a very good starting point to deepen a phenomenon, I tried to start from a different perspective and from analytical psychology as a background to explore this current phenomenon in its various colors. The metaphor that is informing the whole book is that of the kaleidoscope. The title of the book is Lost Goddesses, then I will tell you why. There is a subtitle, which is a kaleidoscope on porn. My idea was to write different chapters. Every chapter was focusing on just one aspect of the phenomenon porn. Every chapter could be seen as a color. And so many chapters together were a group of colors, a bunch of colors together, like in a kaleidoscope. So that when you take the book and you rotate it, so to say, you can give evidence to some of the colors in the foreground. This is up to you as readers. I'm happy to know that Marcus has read it, and I hope that I will have a feedback from him, because it's very rare that somebody tells me something about this book nowadays. However, if we start looking at the phenomenon of porn as a phenomenon of our times, we can see it as a complex phenomenon. And I'm very interested in etymology. I always try to look into the words, to their etymological roots. I like very much the word complex, which in Jungian theory has a wide space. So why porn is a complex phenomenon? Because maybe you know already this thing, and I apologize if you know already. But anyway, the origin of complex is a Latin verb, which is complectere. It's the infinite form. Complectere means to keep between your arms. It's like to embrace and to hold. So complectere means to keep many elements in your arms. And complex, so in this case, has not something to do with complicated. It has something to do with the idea that porn as an object is very complex. There are many elements that we can try to embrace when we try to deal with it. Many of these elements are even opposites, and it's not easy to take them together. Like if you will ever read this book, you will see that there are elements which are obviously negative, elements which can be considered even positive in the porn object. And to keep all together is to embrace them all together, is to keep porn as a complex symbol. And then I called, yes, porn as a symbol of our time, a symbol of our current time. And once again, the etymology that you surely know from other Jungians who have lectured in Thiasos, symbol means to throw together. It's a symbalein, these two Greek ancient words, throw many elements together that are connecting with each other, evoking each other, referring, alluding to each other. So definitely, porn is a complex symbol of our current times, and it emerged in a very specific moment of our history of the human consciousness, we can see. It has to do with a very, very powerful element, which is sexuality. And for this reason, it occupies a very big space in the current landscape, psychic landscape of the world. When I was writing the book, I had in mind to try to explore this complex symbol of our time from a Jungian perspective. And as I said before, to avoid any against or pro position about it. Today I have a very short time with you, short in terms of the time required to explore this topic. I mean, the book is not very thick. Marcus can tell you it's a kind of a thin book, but it's very dense. There are really many, many elements in it. And we could easily talk maybe 1 hour for each chapter. There is no time to do that, so don't worry. I will try to make you curious maybe about its content. And I'll try to put on the table some element, but be aware that there is much more than what I can say today about it. Well, first of all, we can start with, again, with etymology, with the word in itself, porn. In many languages, I think, including Portuguese, I think you refer to it as pornografia, pornography. Actually, since I am an etymological geek, I prefer to stick to the idea of calling it porn, not pornografia, because the graphia is referred to writing about porn. The name pornografia was emerging in a period of the Western culture where some books were being written about prostitutes and about sexuality. And those books, like in the 18th century, for example, those books were considered pornografia because the word porn, porne in ancient Greek, means prostitute. And pornografia means to write about prostitutes. So we also in Italian and even in English, pornography, we refer to porn with pornography. But since it's images, it's videos, it's pictures, I don't like to use the word pornografia, which refers to the writing. It's not about the writing. Now it's a visual, mostly a visual phenomenon. So, sticking to etymology, porne in ancient Greek meant the lowest level prostitute. The prostitute that could be found in brothels, taverns, and public streets. Apparently, the root of the word comes from a verb, pernemi, in ancient Greek, which means to sell, to trade. So the pornai in Greek, the prostitutes, were selling, pernemi, to sell, were selling themselves and their bodies, usually in very, very miserable conditions of hygiene and poverty. So, nestled in the word porn that we use today, there is still the meaning of making money out of your own body and out of sexual activity. And also the idea of something degraded, like the low-level prostitute. This is very interesting because it's degraded. It was degraded already in the Greek times, but prostitutes were present in every Greek town. So here we find a very interesting patriarchal hypocrisy, I would call it, to despise something that actually is desired. A feminist writer called Jane Ward speaks about misogyny paradox. She speaks about how in patriarchal society, women are at the same time loved, so to say, admired and hated. Anyway, going back to the content of the book, so I decided to dedicate my exploration mostly to heterosexual porn, aimed at male public. So I'm not speaking of gay or lesbian porn in the book. I'm not speaking of BDSM, if you know what it means, this bondage, domination, sadism, and masochism. So this is not present in the book because it's a very, very peculiar field. I was trying to address the phenomenon of porn meant for usually, let's say, men viewers. And I tried to have a look at this phenomenon through many of the colors. I see some comments. I'm not used to Zoom, so everything is new for me. Forgive me if I get distracted. Great. I would not like to go through the whole, let's say, chapter by chapter structure, but I would like maybe with you to introduce a bit the topic, and then maybe to give you some hint about the interesting elements here, but then leave the space to your own questions. So I guess for most of you, the questions will arise from this conversation. You didn't read the book in advance. So let's see if we can then address to some of the contents of the book through your questions. If you want to do something different, just tell me. I'm perfect with everything you need. So the book is basically 9 chapters. Roughly, we can divide the work in 2 parts. As I said before, I wanted the book to be a kaleidoscope of many colors, so each chapter is a color. Each chapter concentrates on one single element of the phenomenon. But we can divide basically the book in 2 parts. There is a first part where porn is put in relation with many other phenomena of our current Western postmodern society. This is the first part. The second part is deepening the meaning of the phenomenon porn from the inside, so to say. So from the perspective of the viewers, from the perspective of the performers, from the perspective of the phenomenon in itself. In the first part, so porn is put in relation with the phenomena of our current world. Actually, porn is a very interesting object in the landscape of our current world because many features of porn actually are present in many other elements of our world. It's very interesting how we can take porn as an example of the current world, because in porn there are all the elements that are present in many other phenomena we are immersed in. Let's start with the first element, which is the first chapter also. Porn basically is a technological object. It owes its existence precisely to technological devices, like camera obscura, you know, the first kind of camera, daguerreotypes, monochrome and color photography, and then the motion pictures, the movies. These inventions date back to the 19th century. And there is an anecdote, you know, the first camera obscura was invented in 1826. The anecdote is that 5 minutes later, a woman was posing naked in front of it. And the same has been told when the cinema and movies have been invented towards the end of the 19th century. So basically, from the moment where technology made it possible to capture an image or a moving image after some time, somebody started filming some what we would call today porn picture or porn movie. Obviously, the circulation of this material in the beginning of the 1900s was very limited, very, very scarce for the majority of the people. It was limited to maybe restricted circles of wealthy men, usually. And for the whole beginning of the 19th century, this porn material was available for a very small minority. In Vienna, I read, I made some historical research. In Vienna, there were some kind of gentleman nights where these kind of movies, early porn movies, were shown in a private kind of theater, movie theater, in the beginning of the century in Vienna. And basically, throughout the first half of the 20th century, this material made of pictures in black and white, and then in films, also in black and white, were circulating in very small amount and in very restricted circle of the wealthy people, mostly in Europe and America. In the 50s, and from the 50s all onward, with the 8mm, maybe you remember it, with this like tapes, 8mm cameras and cine cameras that were possible to be bought by, let's say, ordinary people. There was an impulse in the kind of growing production, let's say, of erotic movies, still shot in black and white, and still circulating, of course, outside the mainstream. It was just during the 1960s, in the Western world I'm speaking. It would be very interesting to understand how it was in Brazil back then. Maybe you will tell me. But anyway, in the 60s, this kind of material started circulating more and more, still in the underground, of course, especially in UK, in London. There was a very strong production of this erotic material in the area of London, of Soho, for example. And you all know that in the 60s there were other very big phenomena, social phenomena, that were starting, like subverting the norms of the bourgeois morality. There was an impulse to the feminist, let's say, struggle for equality, and all these phenomena were bringing already to the separation of sexuality from reproduction. So basically, this early porn of the 60s was merging together with these social changes, and it was portraying sexuality in a very different way from the previous decades. But still, the distribution was underground, and it was strictly and legally restricted, let's say. We can set the birth of mass porn, which is porn that can be accessed by, let's say, everyone in Europe and in the Western world. Probably we can set the birth of mass porn in 1969. So basically, it's 52 years ago. Denmark was the first country to legally allow the production and the distribution of porn material. Denmark and also Sweden, they were the main market of this porn material filmed in England and in UK illegally. But then they became among the first countries which legalized the distribution and also the production of porn material. So 1969 in Denmark and 1970 in the United States also, there was legal recognition for the possibility to produce and distribute porn material. Basically, mass porn starts there. Then, from the beginning of the 70s, movie theaters started appearing in certain towns like New York, London, many others, dedicated to porn films. So the evolution from camera obscura, daguerreotypes, black and white camera, early movies, 8mm movies, and then the production of real movies brought to the possibility to see these porn movies in movie theaters. And in Europe, at least, this was pretty common in the main big towns during the 70s, until the invention of the video cassette recording VCR system, which was starting in the middle of the 70s in certain countries and got its boom in the 1980s. The VCR system had in the beginning different systems, but the dominating one became VHS. Maybe you know it. VHS, these cassettes, actually started spreading around and people started buying these VHS readers at home, basically because of porn. It was porn that was promoting the sales of these devices, because from going to the movie theater, one could buy a video cassette and watch it at home. And not only, but also stopping and going back and moving back and forth with the movie. So it was a change in the technological device that was offering porn material. And it was more handy and less shameful to see it at home instead of going, you know, like in a movie theater without trying to be recognized. The next technological change was the DVD in the 90s. Until then, the World Wide Web took over, and now porn has dematerialized in files, video files, or JPEG, or pictures, which are available in the net for free and without any effort to be done. So basically, in less than 40 years from the start of mass porn, there was an enormous increase in the reachability of this material. Everyone could reach it at home, together with its progressive dematerialization from paper to paper magazines, to videotapes, to DVDs, and now to video files. This dematerialization has gone hand in hand with the decreasing need to go physically to reach this porn material. Now you can watch porn from your mobile phone in whatever place you are, even in a train. So from this brief review of the technology and the technological devices that made porn accessible, we can definitely state that porn is a technological object. Porn and technology are very entwined. It's a technological product, and as such, it shares the same logic of every technological product that we have in our technological society. In this first part of my book, I referred very much to the work of a German philosopher whose name is Günther Anders. And I'm wondering, I see Marcos among the many faces, if you know the work of Günther Anders in Brazil, if it's been translated in Portuguese or not. It seems you say no. Okay. It's a very interesting thing for me. I will mention a few things about this guy. Günther Anders was a German philosopher. He has been the husband of Hannah Arendt, and he was in the same circle. Yes, exactly, Günther Anders. He was in the same circle of many important philosophers of the 20s and 30s and 40s in Europe. First of all, Heidegger, but also Husserl, Adorno, and other people. They were gathering, and Hannah Arendt herself. They were gathering together. But Günther Anders has a strange destiny of having been mostly forgotten, at least in the wide scale of the world. He has written very interesting books about the society of technology, and his approach is extremely critical and subverting the normal perspective that we have on technology. Günther Anders very many times is subverting the order of things. For example, in the statement that we should not be worried of what we can do with the technology and technological objects. We should be worried about what technology can do with us. Because in his opinion, technology is now the current subject of history, and we as human beings are just co-historical. It's a very strong approach to the technological current world, and it's very interesting how Anders has written basically his main work in 2 volumes. The first volume was written in 1948, right after the war and right after the nuclear explosions of atom bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And the second volume was written in 1980, 40 years later almost, well, 32 years later. It's a collection of essays whose title in English would be something like The Obsolescence of Human Beings. I don't know if Isa, you get this word, so it's a bit tricky. Yes, like being old, outdatedness of human beings, something like that. Maybe you understand from Italian. The title in Italian is L'uomo è antiquato. This is a very interesting book. If you could find some of it, I would recommend to you, those of you who are Jungians already, I think it's a very, very interesting perspective on technology. What puzzles me is that these books have never been translated in English. It's really many, many years now from the first publications, but these books are not circulating in the English-speaking environment. When I was, luckily they have been translated in Italian, so I could read, actually I read everything from Günther Anders that was published in Italian. And it's of course published in German. But in English, the only thing I could find while writing this book on porn was a web page, I think in America, where there are parts of these books translated by somebody. It's not an official translation. For my book on porn, I used these quotations from this American version, let's say, of the books. But this is very interesting for me. It is as if this author has been somehow Freudian, in a Freudian way, repressed and forgotten. But I believe it's a very important author to be taken back. And he helped me much in digging into some aspects of the porn object. For example, addiction and seduction, or the domination of images that we are immersed in the current world. Like the images of the world are accessible, and via internet, for example, you can be everywhere. I mean, I'm speaking with you in Brazil. I'm in Helsinki, Finland. We are here discussing together. So the world has been reduced to images, and it can be consumed as images wherever. So porn is just one example of many other things that has been transformed into images to be consumed and distributed around. Just like gas and electricity, it can come in our homes. And Anders has been very much concerned of how this transformation of the world into images that he calls phantoms, because they are half present and half absent in front of us, how this affects the psyche, how this affects our relationship with the world, how this affects our relationship with our own emotions, and even with our body. Anders has spoken of a lot of topics. Of course, he was not speaking at all about porn, but I have borrowed a lot of his reflections and I have transported them into the exploration of porn, because I found this reflection extremely important to understand how porn is, let's say, present in our lives, just like many other objects. One very strong thing that he claims, Anders, I mean, is that actually we as human beings are just, okay, somebody has found, thank you, Silvio, if I saw rightly. Somebody has found a book, probably. Very good. I will take note of it. I was saying that, for example, it's very interesting how Anders considers human beings as just means and not goals of the technological apparatus. He says that the production apparatus produces goods, and we are basically unpaid employees. We need to consume these goods in order for production to continue. So we are not seeing as the final goal of these products, they're made for us. No, we are made for them. We are made for them to be produced. So we shall consume them as fast as we can in order for production never to stop. Many of these ideas can be applied also to porn. Now it's too short a time to delve into this topic, but I can tell you that after the first 4 or 5 chapters of the book, you will have a clear idea how porn is just a way to understand how our current world functions. Through porn, certain phenomena become very visible. But if you take away from porn, you can apply them to everything, from our mobile phones to our computers, to almost every object of our life. Under this perspective, for example, addiction, which is often the topic that is explored around porn, is seen as a very obvious element of everything in our current world. Actually, we are invited to become addicted to everything that surrounds us. We are invited to become consumers of everything. Addiction is subtly or openly cultivated by every aspect of our current world. So it's very interesting how then many books try to focus on porn and the problems of addiction that porn can generate, because obviously some people start getting involved in watching porn for many hours per day, and this becomes a problem. But if we see how our world is based on addiction, like we are invited to become addicted of so many things, it's strange to worry only to stop addiction about porn, because actually it's like, but the image that came to my mind, it's like trying to switch off a fan in the middle of a windstorm. Yes, okay, we can switch that fan, the porn addiction, but the rest of the world is in a way encouraging us to be addicted and dependent to everything that surrounds us. So basically, dependency and addiction is the current condition in which we are immersed. This is just one example of how porn can help us to see some other phenomena that are around us. Another chapter called Porn and Seduction starts from the idea that porn has introduced in the current world sexuality and explicit sexuality to the point that the current word has been defined as pornified. In musical video clips, for example, there's an imagery which is very much influenced by the imagery of porn. In fashion, there is, since many decades now, an imagery which is very, very much influenced by the porn imagery. If we go on Facebook and Instagram, people themselves, they portray themselves and put their pictures in a way which is very, very much informed by the porn imagery. And there is, for example, a book in America where there are many books in America about porn as a danger, you know. One is exactly called Pornified. And the main thesis of this book is that porn has corrupted and colored so many aspects of the current life, like from music, videos, movies, fashion, and even like the way people portray themselves. But once again, going to Günther Ander's reflections, we can see that actually it's not true that porn brought this sexualization in the world. Sexualization is the product of a specific industry that was born in the end of the 19th century, the industry of advertisement and marketing. Because since the Industrial Revolution and since the mass production started, and then when the world became very much based on the production of goods, the production of goods required a specific industry in order to produce the desire for the goods. This is what Günther Anders says. Desire have to be produced also, because we do not have the desires for those objects unless it's produced in us. So basically, the industry of production of desires, which started really in the end of the 18th and 19th century, in order to cultivate desires in us, had to seduce us as consumers. You can imagine, in a huge amount of objects, we can be attracted by those objects who have a particular capacity of seduction. Among many, we are seduced by some. So basically, the industry of production of desires started taking the best example of seduction as a way to produce desires. And what is the best example of seduction? Sexual seduction for human beings. So basically, the industry of advertisement started using the sexual attraction and the sexual seduction from the very start. Obviously, in the beginning of the 20th century, there were laws and values and norms that made it a bit restricted to certain images that could be produced. So it was not as explicit in the beginning, but maybe a beautiful woman. Of course, in a patriarchal society like the Western society is, the body of women was the best example of the sexual seduction possible. And the body of the women has been taken as a way to produce desire for whatever. They were advertising a car with beautiful women, or a drill with a nice, beautiful women in bikini already in the 50s. So obviously, this has been going on and on and on throughout the 20th century. And then when the laws changed and the norms changed after the 60s, and also when porn became a mass porn product itself, obviously this seductiveness of goods could attain from porn imagery much more. So it's not porn that has sexualized the world, but actually the world was sexualized already by the industry of marketing. And then when porn became allowed, it became just another product to sell. And obviously this product has been advertised with sexuality, because in a way, porn is the most honest object to be advertised with sexuality, because it is about sexuality. It's much more strange to advertise a drill with a naked body, but to advertise porn with a naked body is more coherent. And anyway, now from porn, the imagery of seductiveness came back to the marketing industry and the publicity industry. So there's several elements that we can deepen on. I think the last one I would like to mention is something that may interest most the Jungians here. So after exploring many phenomena through the lenses of porn, like addiction, phantoms, meaning like this domination of images in our current world, seduction and advertisement, the lack of ethical responsibility that is very common in every field of our work, also in porn. After exploring all these things, I went in the second part of the book to explore the phenomenon in itself. And here it's very interesting, because many books in psychoanalysis are focusing, especially in psychoanalytical approach, they're focusing mostly on the pathological side of porn. And they focus on the user of porn, especially, of course, if he's addicted to it. But in general, there are many books that you can find where there are references to Melanie Klein partial objects, some kind of not reaching the Oedipal plot. So basically looking for a gratification, immediate gratification without going to the genital level. I mean, masturbation as a way to reach this immediate gratification and not reaching the genital level of development in Freudian terms. Erotization of childhood traumas that may explain why a person is excited by certain things. To me, all these explorations, of course, can be interesting and valid, but they seemed not to grasp or not even to stop on the topic of porn itself as a phenomenon. And moreover, I don't know how is it in Brazil, but for example, in Finland, where I live now, there has been very good surveys on sexuality of the Finnish population in the last 50 years. Questionnaires sent anonymously to people about many topics, like what kind of sexuality they like, if they have sexual experiences outside marriage, extramarital experiences, about homosexuality, about masturbation, about going with prostitutes, and about the use of porn. So there are surveys which started in the 70s, and they're still going on. And every maybe 10 years, they survey the Finnish population. So one of the things that have been explored is the use of porn by people. And I don't have the time now to go into the details of this research, I'm sorry, but believe me, just on this rough level, the current situation in Finland is that 9 men over 10 currently use porn, and 6 women over 10. If we go on lower age, like 20, 30 years old, it's even higher. If we go on older age, it's a bit less, but now I'm telling you the average, like 9 men over 10 and 6 or 7 women over 10. if we stick to the typical approach, psychoanalytical approach on porn, we shall say that 9 men over 10 and 8 women on 10 did not reach the Oedipal phase, are stuck to partial objects, have infantile traumas that have been eroticized. It's hard to believe, for me, at least. I would rather think that there is something else in the phenomenon porn that makes it interesting for most of the people. Interesting, fascinating, maybe even unsettling. But we as Jungians are very familiar with the concept of numinous, something that can be fascinating and unsettling at the same time. I think porn has the features of the numinous as a phenomenon. So I tried to start from a discussion that James Hillman had with another Jungian analyst, a woman, back in the 90s, when Hillman published this paper on porn. The title is Pink Madness, if you want to look for it. I started from that discussion just as a starting point to agree on one thing. Porn evokes something dealing with the numinous in most of the people. May it be on the side of the unsettling and the even disgusting for some people, may it be fascinating, attractive to the point of addiction for some others. And I tried to explore deeply what could be there that accounts for this kind of fascination without going to the pathological approach that usually is adopted in this concern. And my hypothesis is that porn scenes, especially through women actresses, enters a very interesting territory, the territory of the undifferentiated. I called it like this. If you're familiar with porn, as it is nowadays, the internet porn, you will probably see how men, actors, are basically doing the same things all the time since the very start of porn. Very few is required to the male actors in the act of porn. Basically, they just have to have an erection to be able to penetrate and ejaculate and possibly have good dimensions, so to say, because it makes it easier than to film certain positions. But on women actresses, stays a very, very heavy burden, the heaviest burden of transforming a lot of different emotions into something positive. Porn experience, through the women experience, has to do with a vast variety of emotions, from discomfort to pain, to disgust, to uncomfortable positions, to a lot of stuff. And all of these have to be performed as if they were all good. On women rests the burden of transforming the differences between what is good, what is bad, what is pleasant, what is unpleasant, into something wonderful. So basically, women perform different degrees of undifferentiation, where these differences are abolished. This is, of course, my opinion about it, but I see in internet a whole catalog of the different degrees of performances that tend towards the polarity of non-differences. Non-differences between what is good, what is bad, what is pleasant, what is unpleasant, what is pleasurable, what is painful. So women perform on a continuum towards the polarity of undifferentiation. But undifferentiation or indifferentiated was a concept that in previous eras was always associated with the sacred. It was the gods who were beyond good and bad, who were beyond the differences. It is in the realm of the sacred that there were no differences. The differences are introduced by the consciousness, by the subjectivity. I feel this, and I feel that this is okay, and this is not okay. But beyond this, in the realm of the sacred, it's hard to tell what is right, what is wrong. So the idea is that somehow porn represents on the stage something which has to do with the undifferentiated, something that in previous eras was connected with the sacred and the divine. We live definitely in a world that has become desacralized. Of course, the individual people can be still religious, can be still believing in something, but as a whole, our Western society has lost the idea of the sacred. This is something which a lot of people, a lot of authors have dedicated their reflections to, including Jung. The desacralized world is starting even from Nietzsche statement that God is dead. We see many authors dealing with the topic of the loss of the sacred, the loss of the transcendental. So we live in a desacralized world. Porn seems to offer to the viewers unconsciously, it's unconscious to the viewers, a place where there is something that resonates with what used to be in the realm of the sacred. And porn actresses can be seen like goddesses from ancient times. And I put here a parallel with the book that you might know called The Sacred Prostitute by Quills Corbett, I think is the author, Nancy Quills Corbett. So we can say that porn is a phenomenon that has something to do with what in previous times was the realm of the sacred. But obviously we experience it in the current time, where the sacred is vanished, and it becomes just a hint to the sacred. It actually, in the current time, it's just a product like many other. There is nothing transgressive in porn here. If you go on YouPorn or whatever web page you want to choose, it's a kind of supermarket. There are shelves and there are products. Can you tell me what is less transgressive than a supermarket? Just a place where there are displayed different things like blondes, brunettes, a threesome, anal sex, Brazilian, because there is a section Brazilian if you go and check. And it's just a shelf. So obviously there's nothing sacred there in the current way it is portrayed. But maybe my hypothesis was this: there is an unconscious nostalgia for some elements that were belonging to previous eras that porn evokes. And we access to porn, maybe unconsciously, with this kind of need, only to find a product and only to find that we just consume it. And we are invited to consume it again and again, actually with no sacred transformation. A Prostituta Sagrada, yes, that's the book, yes. We only find the repetition of consumption of a product that hints at something which is actually out of reach in this form that we can access today. But definitely porn evokes something of that. And actually, in the chapter about porn and shadow, which I invite you to deepen very much, Paul Scorbus, yes, I forgot the first name, thank you. If you go in the chapter Porn and Shadow, you will try to connect porn elements that are made visible through porn elements in you as a spectator. In a way, porn is a very interesting experience in order to explore our own shadow elements. This is also something very interesting, because we could find there, like we know from Jungian writings and post-Jungian writings, that actually getting in touch with shadow elements can be transformative, can be an important experience of integrating elements which are not included in our conscious life. And there are some elements in the porn side of, in the shadow side of porn, which are very enriching. And there are, of course, also destructive shadow elements that we can detect through the experience of porn. So not only through porn we have the hint of a sacred experience, but we can get in touch also with a lot of shadow elements and explore them deeply, which is something totally opposite to what is suggested by the usual pathologizing approach to porn. It's very interesting how books about porn in psychoanalytical environment, they're always speaking of the use of porn of patients, of other people, as if the analysts never deal with it. I don't believe it. I mean, if it's 9 men over 10, I don't think that all the men in the 10% of non-users are analysts. I believe that many of us know what we're speaking about. And I want to conclude with this. Many books, especially in America, there are so many books intended for women, how to survive the trauma of finding out that your husband or partner sees porn material. If you read my book, you would probably, as a woman, be very happy to know more about what kind of porn is my partner watching. Like, giving for granted that he watches it, it's very interesting what are the shadow elements that we can find there, because there's a bunch of them. It's a kind of way to know the other. And I would recommend, instead of thinking of it as a trauma, thinking of it as a great chance to see something of the deeper level of the psyche of the other. Okay, I don't know if I'm supposed to finish now. I guess so. And I guess I shall leave space to you. I hope I was able to convey some of the ideas. Maybe Marcus can tell me, since he read the book, if I succeeded or not in it. I didn't prepare at all this talk. I wanted to be very much spontaneous with you and just say what was coming to my mind in the interaction with you. If somebody, I think the sentence means that somebody would like to make me a question, and I think I'm very, very happy to let you speak now for a while. So thank you very much for your attention so far.
Muito obrigado, Giorgio. Várias questões interessantes que você está trazendo por um tema que geralmente nós costumamos abordá-lo por uma via moral, que nos dificulta a possibilidade de penetrá-lo por um viés mais psicológico, simbólico. A gente vai abrir para perguntas, mas eu queria, antes fazer uma pergunta específica,
Yes.
Saber a tua opinião. Ao ler o seu livro e te ouvir agora, me parece que a tua intenção é recuperar uma espécie de legitimidade do fenômeno pornográfico. Dar à pornografia uma recuperação de um espaço legítimo de existência. Não é perversão, não é tão somente alguma coisa que deva ser pensado como algo a ser corrigido. E me parece que eu estou pensando junto aqui, se a perversão é quase um objeto cultural que determina nossos desejos, que cria nossos desejos, eu queria te perguntar se a pornografia pode ser considerada um certo modo específico de estar no mundo. Quer dizer, tirando-a da categoria da perversão, tirando-a da categoria da sombra, tirando da categoria de uma patologia, pode a pornografia ser pensada como um modo cultural de habitar o mundo, de estar no mundo? Acho que era uma primeira pergunta para a gente começar o debate.
Okay, thank you, Marcos. The question is very complex and very big, so I'll try to address to some of it. Definitely, you're right. With my book, I wanted to rescue Gunther Anders to the English-speaking Jungian environment, and yes, to frame porn outside the usual frame of perversion pathology. You're right. But as porn is a complex object, as I said in the beginning, there are many elements in it. In the shadow, for example, chapter you probably remember, we can see that one shadow element that porn makes visible is our being a desiring multiplicity. We as human beings, we desire in multiple ways. We are not mono-desiring. And another element in the shadow is the pleasure of being a body. In porn, you see people having sex no matter how they look, how they are. It can be very, very democratic, so to say, accepting. I'm saying as it is seen. I mean, the fiction that we see. I'm not speaking of how it is in the reality of the experience of the actors. But anyway, we see a representation of a pleasure of being a desiring body, and we see how there is a desiring multiplicity in all of us. These elements are shadow elements because for thousands of years, desire, the feminine body, sexuality have been put in the shadow of the Western world. They have been demonized by Christianity, by religious frames, by morality. All these elements have been cast in the shadow. But these elements that are in the shadow are actually good elements. There is my battery a bit low. Let me put just, I plug in. Okay, I will have to move. Okay, forgive me for this technology takes its toll. I'm criticizing technology, so technology obviously has a revenge. So these elements that are in the shadow, Marcus, they are very enriching if they are retrieved, like the pleasure of being a body, the desiring multiplicity. Obviously, in porn, there are also shadow elements which are not at all nice. The brutality and the diminishing of women is evident. Modern porn has been changing very much from the beginning porn of the 70s. In the 70s, the representation in porn movies was of a joyful sexual experience. But now the performances go towards a very brutal and violent polarities, where brutality and violence is addressed on women. So this is also definitely one of the colors of modern porn, contemporary porn. And this is definitely not something very nice. Actually, this invites, together with many other things, to question our patriarchal structures, which are still very, very powerful. I'm reading a lot of books about feminism and about also the review of Jungian concepts through the feminist lenses, because also Jung, I mean, was born in the end of the 19th century. There are many theoretical ideas which are imbued of patriarchal perspective, animus, anima, and a lot of other stuff. So I think we have to question a lot of concepts when we question the patriarchal frames in Jungian theory, and also porn is also an object that is imbued with patriarchal elements. So those elements have to be detected very well and criticized and transformed. But there are shadow elements which are positive and put porn outside of the frame of a perversion, and that's it. I hope I replied.
Tá ótimo. Obrigado, Giorgio. Vamos começar as perguntas, sempre fazendo aquele adendo das perguntas poderem ser sucintas para que a gente possa oferecer o maior número de espaço para o debate, tá? Andrew, você, por favor.
Bom dia, obrigado pela palestra, muito boa. Eu gostaria de fazer uma pergunta sobre primeiro, sobre a associação entre pornografia e o medo da prostituição, né? Porque, principalmente atualmente, tem muitas atrizes pornô e muitas prostitutas também que vêm adotado uma forma totalmente autônoma, inclusive pró-pornografia, pró-prostituição. E uma das coisas que elas costumam falar é o quanto que, de certa forma, a pornografia e a prostituição denunciam o modelo monogâmico onde a gente vive, sendo a pornografia e a prostituição uma forma de zona de escape para conseguir lidar com as tensões inerentes a esse modo de viver que é muito antigo e que sempre esteve presente. Então, eu gostaria de saber até que ponto que você considera que a pornografia e todo esse discurso patologizante da pornografia não tem de pano de fundo também um discurso moral de não conseguir olhar para estruturas mais complexas da nossa sociedade que não sabe como lidar com o desejo quando ele escapa à estrutura monogâmica de funcionamento.
Thank you. Obrigado for this question.
Giorgio, deixa eu só fazer um comentário. Para quem for fazer as perguntas, falar um pouquinho mais devagar para a Isa poder escutar com atenção, para poder transmitir da melhor maneira para o palestrante, tá? Obrigado.
Yes. Okay. I hope, Isa, that I was speaking slow enough for you. Okay. Yes, if I understand the question, the person says that porn and prostitutions are ways to embody some desires that the usual monogamous norms are forbidding, if I understood right. The person says...
Sim, foi isso mesmo.
Okay.
E o quanto...
Yes.
E o quanto, de certa maneira, isso denuncia a nossa dificuldade de abertura para outros modelos relacionais também.
I think it is a good reflection that did not come to my mind. So thank you. It is a possibility to see porn and prostitution as a way to break the frame of monogamous relationship, maybe, and probably porn is actually, it is more acceptable within a couple, that people can be watching porn and maybe masturbate because sexuality and masturbation have been probably more and more being accepted in the normal range of sexual behaviors that we can have. So it is definitely a good point. I would also reply with another way, which is nowadays, at least here in Finland and in America, I guess, and in other European countries, taking space in the debate, the public debate, but also in academic research, let's say. And it is the phenomenon of polyamory. I wonder if you are familiar with it, and if it's in Brazil also something that is circulating more. I happen to be writing about this topic. I don't know if it will, I don't think it will come out kind of a book, but I'm writing some articles, and one will be published very soon in this journal called Psychological Perspectives, which is an American journal, Jungian journal, published by, I think, the Los Angeles Institute or the San Francisco Institute, I'm not sure, I think Los Angeles. And Psychological Perspective will, the next number will have an article of mine about couple relationships as a symptom. And I'm talking about polyamory there a bit in the end of it. And I will continue to write on this topic because I think it's a very interesting way that is regarding more and more people in the current society of including our desiring multiplicity and the dimension of desire in other ways than pornography and prostitution, I would say. So if you're interested, maybe check this article. Maybe I will, when I have a copy of it myself, I can send it to Marcus if you don't tell to anyone, and you can read it.
Obrigado, Andrew. Wagner, vamos lá?
Olá, olá, boa tarde. Gostei muito da sua palestra, Giorgio. É interessante a gente, né, abordar um tema, né, que, em princípio, possa ser considerado como um dos pantanais da alma, né, segundo o James Hollis, né? É legal considerar esse tema. A partir da sua fala, Giorgio, um tema que me veio à reflexão foi a questão do quanto que nós podemos associar pornografia e invisibilidade, né? Na década de 70, por exemplo, né, a pornografia, né, nós acessávamos via as famosas revistas Playboy, Penthouse e outras revistas, né? Só que para você acessar essas revistas, né, esse material impresso, era necessário que você se dirigisse a uma livraria, a uma banca de jornal, né? Então, era mais ou menos conhecido, até dos amigos, né, a gente falava, né, abertamente, né, estou consumindo pornografia, né? Era algo que parece que era validado, né? Falar sobre pornografia abertamente mediante um instrumento, né, um material chamado revista, né? Com a web, né, com o progresso das mídias, parece que foi havendo um ocultamento dessas ações, ou seja, parece que falar de pornografia, abordar pornografia, parece que é algo relacionado à invisibilidade, ou seja, não é bom, não é lícito saber que eu consumo pornografia, apesar de todos saberem que, a algum grau, todos nós consumimos pornografia. Então, eu gostaria de debater um pouco esse tema, né? Como é que você percebe essa possibilidade, essa dialética, né? Porque pornografia é, ao mesmo tempo, exibição, abertura, todos veem, mas, ao mesmo tempo, é algo da ótica do invisível, não posso mostrar a alguém que eu consumo pornografia, né? Então, eu queria que você debatesse um pouquinho sobre essa dialética, né? Pornografia e invisibilidade. Obrigado.
Yeah, it is an interesting question. Thank you, because definitely it is true. From the 70s and 80s, I don't know if it's in Brazil also those dates, but anyway, from the moment where porn was accessible in magazines and you needed to go physically to a place, and if you were underage, you had even to reach this material in maybe illegal ways, stealing it from the bookstore or whatever, and also going physically to a movie theater was something challenging in a way. We see a progressive change to porn as something that can be enjoyed alone and in secrecy. But isn't this the destiny of many phenomena of our current world? I mean, dematerialization and the possibility to be not in need to do things with our body. We can sit at home, switch on a computer, watch porn, and then switch on Zoom and talk with somebody else, and then see a movie in Netflix, and then have a Skype call with somebody in another country. Everything we can do it from home without physically needing to be interacting. Obviously, we can reflect, you underlined the invisibility, meaning that you can watch porn in secrecy and nobody sees you. Yes, but we can also think of how all these technological devices are making it useless to embody experiences. We can just have them virtually. And the impact of this on our psyche is still to be explored, like the dissociation from the body, the dissociation also from the responsibility of what we see. I see a movie, I see a violent scene. I don't know what happens to the girl after the movie scene or before. I don't care. I just watch this scene. I use it for my own masturbation, and I don't have any responsibility for anything else. We are detached from the real physical experience of something. So not only I agree with your idea of invisibility or not needing to be seen, the possibility not to be seen, but also let's reflect, you can all reflect yourself, I mean, within yourself, on the impact of this virtualization of these experiences and the need, let's say, the possibility of not involving even the body into it. Of course, apart from the physical touching yourself when you masturbate, but the body is just very self-referential and detached from the experience. There's many other reflections. Yes, there can be even more chapters in the book if we include these other dimensions. Yes. Thank you.
Obrigado, Wagner. Abraço. Antonieta, contigo, por favor.
Antonia.
Okay. Thanks for your words. From in the beginning of your speech, you were talking about porn being kind of despicable and not acceptable, and I was thinking about how we developed using porn and producing porn through time, from the porn stars and the websites and people that we didn't even know. And now we have the nude phenomena and OnlyFans and other stuff that permit people to produce porn and even make money from it.
Yes.
And what do you think about it? Is it a movement that allow porn to be less despicable and more acceptable, or do you think it's something more like what you were talking about just now, of the virtually and the not the negation of leaving the body and actually experiencing things?
Okay, thank you for the question. Also, I mean, all these questions are very complex. They hint at very complex aspects, like many things to be taken into account. I guess you're speaking, I mean, the World Wide Web developed from one direction channel to a mutual channel. I mean, we can upload our own material. We are not only passive users, yes. And this has given the start to what in porn is called amateur section. So I think that all the things that you were listing can be valid at the same time. for this amateur porn stuff. I mean, on one hand, the amateur phenomenon, it's normalizing the possibility of seeing porn and producing porn for people. It's also giving the possibility to people to become active and not only passive in the porn scale. Yes. It normalizes porn also in the way that amateur has become a genre in itself in the porn supermarket. It's one of the products, and definitely one, if we want to see some positive element of it, amateur porn makes it very much more acceptable and normalized, that you don't need to be a top model with silicone boobs or shapes. You can be just a normal person. You can be whatever physical appearance. You can be fatty, you can be slim, you can be of any color. And so on one hand, the amateur has brought some kind of democratization of the porn environment, and also the widening of the parameters of taste in people. On the other hand, until the end of the 80s, porn had developed as an industry with actors and actresses which were professional. They were having contracts. They were having unions. And then when Soviet Union collapsed and all the countries belonging to the Iron Curtain, like Ukraine, Czechoslovakia, Belarus, became, let's say, independent, not anymore under the Soviet Union, there was an enormous economical crisis in those countries and an enormous amount of poverty and violence. Actually, that event, according to a sociologist I quote in the book, gave start to a phenomenon where a lot of women from these poor countries were willing to do anything for money. And this changed completely the porn industry, because they started with a small production, like just a camera and a room to film and these women. And the porn scenes were filmed so more and more in a very non-professional way and environment. But this swept away the porn industry and the amateur and the professional and the unions and everything. And actually, the fact that these women were willing to do anything for money brought porn imagery towards a much more extreme and also violent and brutal polarity. And all the professional actors and actresses, in order to sell their product, had to go to that extreme direction themselves. So this amateur phenomenon, in a way, which started with this small production in the eastern countries of ex-Soviet times, brought actually a lot of let's say, more negative effect on the market and on the people itself, because then they were filming out of contracts with no unions, with no rights for the actresses, and with much more brutality and extreme behaviors filmed. And actually, the whole industry had to change to that. So, in your question, there is the seed for both things. On one hand, there are kind of normalizing elements, and on the other hand, there is the possibility that things, let's say, towards the extreme can be performed.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Many questions make me think now. I did not think about these things before, so thank you.
Obrigado, Antonieta. Giorgio, provavelmente teremos um volume 2 do seu livro, quem sabe? Marta Chagas, vamos.
Boa tarde, obrigado pela palestra, realmente foi muito interessante. E eu queria colocar assim, duas coisinhas, né? Aqui no Brasil, nós tivemos um golpe militar, né, entre os 64 até 85, né? E aqui teve muita censura. A censura estava em todos os lugares, né? Nas escolas, nas artes, no teatro. E, coincidentemente, né, o que eles deixavam era a questão de filmes pornográficos, que aqui eram chamados de pornochanchadas. Foi uma produção muito grande brasileira nessa época, né, de muitas cenas de sexo, né, nos filmes, mulheres nuas, bonitas e todas aquelas, né, coisas. E eram filmes que tinham também muito palavrão, coisa que a própria censura do golpe militar não deixava, né? Tanto é que músicas como o do Tom Zé, um compositor aqui, ele não pôde, na letra, falar de arroto de Coca-Cola. Ele teve que mudar porque a pessoa da censura não gostava nem de palavra como arroto, né? Então, assim como se ficasse, de uma certa maneira, né, essa produção, as pessoas irem ver filmes brasileiros, né, com sexo, como se isso aliviasse um pouco a tensão para não ter tanta resistência ao próprio golpe militar, né? Então, assim, tinha futebol, o Brasil foi tricampeão, e tinham essas coisas que eram permitidas, e o sexo, né, nesse tipo, ficava permitido, como essa válvula, né, de escape, né? Mas eu queria só, se você pudesse contextualizar um pouquinho, quando você falou sobre agora, né, a questão dos homens fazendo os filmes, né, que os homens eles não atuam, eles continuam com pouco atores, entre aspas. Eles continuam só tendo ereção, penetração, e as mulheres é que têm um outro papel, né? Elas que vão, né, você falou até da questão aí do reino da indiferenciação, né? Muito importante isso. Mas eu fiquei pensando assim, isso não confirma a ideia que o homem age e a mulher representa? Né? Porque se as coisas estão boas ou mais, as mulheres estão sempre trazendo uma representação de um prazer muito intenso. Dentro dessa lógica um pouco masculina, né? De que desconfia-se da mulher porque a mulher representa. O homem, ele tem ereção ou não tem, né? Então é como, não sei, só uma questão.
Okay, it doesn't sound to me as a question, but it sounds more like that you shared some elements, and I thank you very much for telling me how it was in Brazil back in the 70s and 80s, of course, and reminding of the military coup and everything. Yes, I don't hear the question here. I heard interesting reflections from your side, so I don't know what to add to it. The only thing I would say is that this idea that men act and women represent is, I never heard it this way, but if it's true, it's definitely true within a patriarchal frame. And I really hope that we as human beings, we will move forward from patriarchal frames, because it's really damaging so many dimensions of our psychic life, the patriarchal frame, for women, but also for men. So I hope it will be different. Anyway, in porn, there is also a lot of other kind of porn. There is porn for women, more and more. I think also there is a lot of porn from lesbians, which and they are very, very different from the mainstream porn intended for males. You all can find these things in the net if you want to explore these different landscapes. So definitely it's a field that is evolving and changing. We shall, I think as therapists, we have to know more about it and to talk about it. What is puzzling is that there is so few things about porn in our in our circles, like unless we are speaking of perversions and pathology and so on. So I hope that your questions are already an example of your own reflections, and I hope that this will circulate even more and more reflections about these topics. Forgive me, but I didn't hear any question there.
Obrigado, Martinha. Lu Ximenes.
Giorgio, super obrigada pela tua excelente apresentação. É um tema super complexo e que você conseguiu fazer de uma forma coerente, assim, para a gente conseguir entender. Você sumiu aqui da minha tela, então eu estava tentando te achar aqui. Achei você agora.
I'm here.
Yeah. Eu fiquei com alguns incômodos, que eu acho que essa é a ideia, né? Super corajoso você descrever e falar sobre isso e trazer esses incômodos para a gente. Eu queria trazer 2 dos incômodos que eu fiquei. Eu preciso tomar cuidado para não parecer moralista, porque é fácil, né, parecer moralista quando a gente faz perguntas sobre esse assunto. Eu concordo e eu compreendo que a pornografia vem para denunciar algumas coisas do coletivo, que vem para denunciar coisas da vida pessoal de quem consome a pornografia. Eu concordo que a pornografia legitima outras tantas coisas, mas eu acho que tem uma questão na pornografia que, para mim, é a que mais pega, que é a falta de eros. Né? Que eu acho que é até uma coisa que o Hillman fala quando ele fala da loucura cor-de-rosa, né? Da Afrodite. Então, quando se fala em falta de eros, quem consome a pornografia, será que isso não reforça esse sintoma, né? Da falta de vínculo da pessoa? Esse é um dos meus incômodos. E o outro incômodo é com você falou um pouco disso, eu queria que você falasse um pouquinho mais, que são as mulheres, as atrizes, as mulheres que estão fazendo a pornografia. Quem são essas mulheres? Por que as mulheres estão lá? O que aconteceu com elas? É uma opção? Não é uma opção? Como elas são tratadas? Como seriam elas se elas estivessem no nosso consultório? O que elas falariam para a gente?
Thank you, Luciana. Well, the lack of eros is a topic that has been discussed precisely between Hillman and this other woman analyst, Ayo, in an exchange of articles in the 90s. In the book, I speak about it because it's often an element that is brought in the discussion by colleagues in psychoanalysis, especially this idea of lack of eros. Well, and lack of attachment, you said. I don't know to what you refer now, if you refer in the performance between the actors, or if there is a lack of attachment because as a spectator, I'm actually not even participating and I am separated by a screen. I don't know which one of the two things you were underlining now. Anyway, they're both something to reflect upon. What I would say is that usually in psychoanalytic works, there is a typical distinction between what is erotic and what is pornographic. There is this distinction between eros and porn, as if eros is the more elevated, artistic representation of nudity and of sexuality. And when it's too explicit, it's not anymore eros, but it's more porn. There is this distinction of of two realms. In my book, I questioned this distinction precisely because when this discussion between Hillman and this other colleague, Bob Ayo, they were discussing about what gods are behind porn. Obviously, Hillman, you know, it's the founder of the archetypal school, and also this other woman. They are both talking about what gods can be behind, and they were debating. And so, according to Hillman, there was Aphrodite there, but according to this other woman, there is a lack of Aphrodite, lack of Eros, and so on. Okay, I took some position here in the book where I do not agree with this distinction between Eros and porn like the usual way, as Eros is the superior, more artistic, elevated and developed, and porn is the vulgar, rough, devaluated element. I don't agree much here because speaking of Aphrodite, precisely, in the book, I was trying to show two things. Between parentheses, I'm not very fond of the archetypal perspective myself. I would not stick to what gods are behind porn personally. But anyway, I was, let's say, participating to this debate virtually between Hillman and this other person. And I was pointing out that if we speak of Aphrodite, or Aphrodite, how it's pronounced in English, I don't know, Aphrodite, we can see how women in porn embody many of the postures and the gestures of Aphrodite in ancient Greek statues. So first of all, the imagery, like the postures and the gestures of porn actresses, embodies, of course, unconsciously, I guess, because they would not try to imitate any Greek statue, but we find a lot of statues from ancient Greek that are exactly embodying the Aphrodite positions. And then, secondly, I mention how Aphrodite in Greek mythology has many dark sides. So when we link Aphrodite to the erotic and so the spiritual good one, we forget the dark sides of Aphrodite, which are also present in Greek mythology, because in mythology there is always all the contents, also the opposites. And we can find elements of Aphrodite which are far from spiritual, elevated, and developed. They are very much on the brutal, dark side. You probably know how Aphrodite has other goddesses in previous eras in other countries before Greece. I mean, we can track back Aphrodite to Cibeles in other places, to Ishtar, to Inanna from Sumerians, and all these goddesses were often the goddesses of sex, love, and war, which is not in the Greek Aphrodite, but Aphrodite was together with Mars, who was the god of war. But in other traditions, actually, Aphrodite had, or these other versions, had already within themselves very dark sides. So I do not endorse this distinction between erotic and pornographic. I think when it's about the body, we have all the range. But definitely then the worry about women, the real women, the actresses, their lives, how they feel, I try to have a lot of attention, and most of my book is basically stating some ideas starting from the embodied experience of the actresses, which is usually very extreme and very demanding, and probably very psychologically damaging. To obtain the undifferentiated, to go towards the undifferentiated, to go to the polarity where good and bad are the same, requires to the woman, the real woman, to dissociate from your own emotions and your own physical sensations, which means I feel pain, but I dissociate this pain and I show its pleasure. So actually, this going towards the undifferentiated is based on the dissociation of as a mechanism, not even as a unconscious mechanism, but as a, actually I call it in another way in my book, I call it dislocation. I have to dislocate my emotions from a locus, from a place to another. My emotion is pain, and I dislocate it to, it's wonderful, and I have to fake it. It's a demanding effort, and I empathize enormously in the book. I mean, I think it's very explicitly anti-patriarchal, the book, because very many times I let myself go with very critical statements for men. Maybe Marcus can tell it. So I agree with this side. I don't underestimate what it means for the concrete experience of women. We have to deal, actually, if I would can say something myself, instead of the current porn, it would be very nice if we extract from porn as an object some elements and we embody them personally in our own lives, not virtually. Then maybe porn could give some transformative element, but the current porn has a lot to be concerned about. I hope I replied, yes.
Obrigada, muito obrigada.
Thank you.
Obrigado, Lu. Giorgio, temos espaço para mais uma pergunta? Pode ser? Mais uma?
Yes, let's have the last one, fine.
Vamos lá, Caio Duarte.
Olá, boa tarde. Muitíssimo obrigado pela palestra de hoje. Eu estudo sobre a indústria pornográfica há alguns anos. Atualmente eu estou estudando em Jung. Então a possibilidade dessa palestra foi muito importante para mim. Foi extremamente relevante e útil para a minha pesquisa.
Great.
Você trouxe imprevisíveis no sentido, ao mesmo tempo impactante, dizendo sobre o acesso da pornografia aos homens, onde, se eu não me engano, a cada 10 homens, 9 acessam ou interagem com pornografia em algum nível. Mas, ao mesmo tempo, eu queria muito saber sobre a sua experiência como analista. Os homens falam sobre pornografia na sessão? A pornografia, como ela é trabalhada, eles discutem essa relação. Eu pergunto isso porque na minha bolha eu não percebo uma experiência de psicólogos e terapeutas com esse assunto. Esse assunto não chega na sessão e a gente sabe que isso está na vida de muitos homens. Então, eu queria um pouco da sua experiência mesmo. Obrigado.
Yes, this is a very, very important question, a useful question to explain why I started writing about this. I agree very much with you. In my experience, it's very, very rare that men speak of their experience with porn in the sessions. And women too, since there are many women, especially in the younger generations, who obviously access porn because it's one of the objects of our world. It's like whatever else. It's like Netflix and this and that, and okay, there is your porn also. So we all know that there is a great access to this material by almost all of our patients. And to my experience, I was saying, it's extremely rare that somebody speaks of it. Sometimes it's hinted, as if it is understood that the person uses porn. But unless the patient frames the use of porn as a problem, unless the patient says, I'm depending on porn, I'm addicted to porn, I waste 5 hours per day on porn, and this is a problem, and I want to solve it, unless they start speaking about porn because it's a recognized problem, they never speak of it, in my experience. And sometimes, since now my patients know that I've written this book, sometimes we have the chance to speak a little bit more because they know that I am interested in the topic. And so sometimes maybe I was telling them, it would be nice for me to know something more about your use of porn, what excites you, what are the things that you look for. Nevertheless, it's very interesting how to speak openly of this seems to be very difficult, as if people are very ashamed of speaking openly. In the consultant room, we can speak of sex, we can speak of masturbation, we can speak of many things, but the use of porn, what kind of porn do you like, is the rarest thing that I've been told. I don't have a research on that, so I don't know what is the experience of the other colleagues. Here we are many, maybe you could, in Theasos, you could raise up at least some research in your group. It would be interesting to know more about statistic data. From my personal experience, I've been speaking with some other female colleagues, and sometimes they told me that in their relationship with some male patients, some patients speak openly about porn when they are trying to provoke the female analyst, as if they are narcissist patients. They are trying to show to the analyst something because she's a woman, and or maybe they are even trying to seduce the therapist by speaking of some porn material in a very clumsy approach, narcissistic approach. So some colleagues of mine, female colleagues, they told me that some patients were telling about porn because of this, trying to provoke or to seduce. For me as a man, I never have spontaneous patients that speak about it. Maybe sometimes I ask when I understand that it's an important topic. I always ask about sexuality during the course of the therapy. We always touch this topic. And now sometimes I ask specifically, well, if you wish, you can share what you like in porn or what, because it can tell something about us, you know? So I try to encourage it. But yes, very few people in my experience.
Obrigado, Caio. Giorgio, eu vou pegar rapidamente carona na pergunta do Caio e te perguntar o que há de pornográfico, o que há de pornográfico no encontro analítico?
Oh, wow, what a question. I've never thought about such a perspective. And the first thing that comes to my mind is that we have to agree on what meaning do we give to this pornographic word here. Because on one hand, as analysts, we are all voyeurs of the others' lives. I mean, we go into their lives. We are in the role of the voyeur, you know this word, like the one who watches, and we don't say much about ourselves. So we are like behind the hole of the door, like watching the life of a person. So is this what you meant by pornographic? Or if by pornographic we mean that there is if we instead mean that, pornography is anyway a product. So there is a consumeristic approach. It's exploiting sexuality, nudity, and sexual behavior for obtaining some money. So if we take pornography with this negative meaning, what do we do in the therapy? That is some kind of exploitment of the other. This, I hope, as an analyst, we don't exploit the other, and we are not taking advantage from the other. So in this case, I would say it's better that we don't have any pornographic approach to it. If pornography is like to be in the role of the spectator and to see something, then maybe we are in your role. We should be instead maybe more present. If you mean this, personally, I'm closer to the relational psychoanalytic approach. I don't think that as analysts we have to be neutral and unknown. I reply to patients' questions. I try to be in a real relationship and to offer a real relationship. So I hope that I'm not pornographic, but I'm present with the other, showing myself as I am, of course, with all the cautiousness that is required according to what patient we have in front. But some self-disclosures for me are the norm. So I don't know. It's a very complicated question, this, Marcos.
Vamos deixar aberto.
You let me think on it. Yes.
Giorgio, queria te agradecer muito a tua presença.
Let's give it over. Let's check on this. Thank you, Marcos. Yes.
Uma manhã excepcional.
Yeah. Please.
Queria agradecer a tua presença. É um tema muito rico, multifacetado, como você bem marcou. São várias portas de entrada para poder lidar com essa imagem pornográfica. Eu acho que você deixa isso e provoca muitas questões para a gente. Queria te agradecer. Mas eu queria te fazer uma última pergunta, posso?
Yes, you're the owner of the place, so of course.
Você também é músico. Eu visitei o teu site e gostei muito das tuas músicas. E eu vi que você escreveu um artigo quando o espírito de Jung encontra os Beatles. Eu, como sou um bitomaníaco, te pergunto. Eu te pergunto, os Beatles não são o que nós temos de mais próximo da imagem arquetípica do selfie? Os Beatles não são a verdadeira estrutura mandálica?
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. It's a quaternity. There are the 4 functions in the Beatles, 4 elements. It's very interesting. Yes. Yes. So maybe it's because of you that there was before the meeting some songs about sex, and you put a song from the White Album. I guess it was your choice to put. Why did we do it in the road? Thank you, Marcus. Yes. Well, if I can say something at the end. I'm extremely, you thank me for my presence, but I feel so bad that I'm not present in physical terms. I really give a lot of importance to the body and the embodiment, and I wished I was there to see all the people in the eyes. I see only a portion, I guess, of the people who were present in this seminar. I saw that somebody was sitting outside in the beautiful weather. I envy you because we have 8 degrees now, and this is the Finnish spring. So basically, I would have loved to be there present in real because I don't like very much this format to be far. But anyway, I thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share these ideas with you. I really do hope that one day we will meet again and possibly in person. I don't know where, but I'm hoping for it because it's much better to interact in person, in my opinion. So this is it was a bit like a porn thing. You can be excited, but you're behind the screen. You can't really not even touch anyone. So it's a bit frustrating. I thank you very much, and also thank you for all the questions, which were very interesting.
Marcos, ele tinha feito uma pergunta no início e eu achei uma resposta. É a Sônia Labate que está falando.
Oi, Sônia.
Então, se tiver tempo, eu conto para ele sobre os livros tradução do Gunther Anders.
Pode falar, se quiser. Por favor.
Giorgio, muito obrigado pela sua palestra. Você fez uma pergunta no início se os livros algum livro do Gunther Anders foi traduzido em português. Eu achei na Wikipedia que sim, um artigo dele chamado Kafka, Pró e Contra, que é de 46, foi traduzido em 68 por um professor da USP, e esse livro está à venda na estante virtual, e tem um link nesse site da Wikipedia que se chama O Mundo como Fantasma e Matriz, Considerações Filosóficas sobre o Rádio e a Televisão, uma tradução crítica de O Antiquismo do Homem, de Gunther Anders. Então, esse é um livro que pode ser baixado na internet. Eu não sei quem fez esse artigo, mas, enfim, respondendo à sua pergunta.
Obrigado, Sônia.
Thank you very much. This can be interesting. If some of you is interested in Günther Anders, I encourage you to read something by him, because it gives a very interesting perspective on the current world, although he wrote many years ago. But
E eu fiquei curiosa de saber como que você foi parar na Finlândia e faz supervisão na Geórgia.
yes. Well, I am from Milano, as I said in the beginning. I met in Milano my current wife, who is Finnish. We lived in Italy for 10 years, and now we lived in Finland for 11 years. So basically, we had the double experience. I don't know if now it's the turn of the third country. Let's see. I don't think in the meantime. And in Georgia, well, I was invited by the liaison person. You know, the IAP has different groups in the world. There is a Georgian developing group, Jungian group. The liaison person is an analyst called John Hill. Maybe you know him, I don't know, from some books. But John Hill is in Zurich, is an English, actually Irish, living in Zurich. He invited me if I wanted to participate as a supervisor, visiting supervisor to Georgia, and I never had such an experience. I was very happy to go to Georgia. Actually, I'm ashamed to say I never was out of Europe. Georgia is the first country I go, let's see, a bit out of Europe. So it was a very fruitful experience. Also, my living in Helsinki has brought me the experience of having many foreign patients. I had patients, Italians living here, of course, but also Brazilians, Argentinians, Canadians, UK, Poland, Russia, Greece, Lithuania. I'm meeting a lot of people from all over the world almost. And it's a very rich experience because it helps to go outside from your automatic cultural biases. And I'm very interested in focusing on analysts' biases. We shall be aware of our own biases to work with patients who come from all over the world. So I'm happy to be in Finland despite the weather and despite the darkness, but it's a very interesting experience and country.
É mundo globalizado e tecnológico que nós vivemos.
Yes.
Muito obrigada. Foi prazer conhecer.
Thank you to all of you. Yes, thank you.
Eu espero que no futuro próximo a gente possa se encontrar, Giorgio, seja na Finlândia, seja no Brasil, seja em qualquer país. Esse pesadelo vai terminar e a gente vai poder ficar junto. Foi um prazer imenso te receber. Muito obrigado pela tua generosidade.
Thank you to all of you. Thank you very much. See you another time.
Pessoal, obrigado pela presença de todos. Mais um belíssimo encontro do Tiaços. O Giorgio tem um site. Quem quiser, eu acho que eu pus o site no grupo. É importante talvez dar uma olhada lá na produção dele. E já fica o convite para sexta-feira que vem. O Tiaços continua com a palestra do Pedro Paiva sobre o teatro... esqueci o título. Teatro da Memória, o Teatro da Memória em Hillman e na Renascença, tá bom? Sexta-feira. Um abraço a todos, bom final de semana. Tchau, tchau. Tchau, Lu. Tchau, Isa. Obrigado.